Tonight we're trying a new game, and it's sort of a Wheel of Fortune, roulette, celebrity death roulette, or a Wheel of Misfortune. Troy assembled this game for me. It's sort of, we're just riffing on names. I started my website, findadeath.com, almost, 25 or so years ago. And Troy went through the files and just picked random names. There's nothing contrived about this. There are just random names that are going to come up on the wheel, and I'm just going to riff on these people, but see if I remember, see if I learned anything else about them, just see what I can come up with. So again, this is really random, a new experience, a new experiment. So I think we can get going. Yeah, what do you think? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So okay, here we go. Jack Wild. Okay, Jack Wild, teen sensation. The movie Oliver, which I think he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for that as the Artful Dodger. Most famous for being in H.R. Pufnstuf here in America, I think. Only 18 episodes in 1969. And he was a teen superstar. He was one of those people that would do celebrity appearances and pack the houses. Now, Jack Wild retired. He's one of those people that sort of didn't make the transition to adulthood and on the screens. And he retired to England. I believe he got married. I think he lived in the north. And I think I remember, I met the guy who was Pufnstuf in the costume. And he told me that while they were making H.R. Pufnstuf, they would let him smoke on stage. And he was only like 11 or something like that. So they let him smoke on the sound stage while they were filming H.R. Pufnstuf, which I think they filmed at Paramount Studios. And they filmed the opening scene with him getting in the water. That was in Big Bear Lake. I remember that. So he retired to, I believe, the north of England. I think he got married. I don't think they had children. And he got cancer and throat cancer, I think it was, from smoking, I believe. And I remember there were horrible pictures of him at the towards the end. I think he had his like larynx removed or something like that. It was just an awful pictures. But I think that is what I have on Jack Wild. I'm trying to think of anything else I know about him. The Pufnstuf thing was my thing. As I said, I think I said this already. There were only 18 episodes of that made, which is and the film with Mama Cass in it too. But that's the biggest recollection I have, is that the actor who was in the van, I forgot his name, Van Smith or something like that, was actually in the costume, said that Jack was able to smoke. Okay. Next random name. I was padding that one. Johnny Ramone. Okay, Johnny Ramone was the diehard behind the group. He was the worker bee in the group, the Ramones. The original four Ramones: Johnny, Joey, Tommy, and Dee Dee. And Johnny's the one who held it together. He's the one that made sure everyone was on time for the shows, in their van together to go to the next gig. Had a ledger to maintain the schedules and to maintain who was getting paid. And I know that Joey and Johnny had a falling out, mostly believed because it was the woman Linda Ramone who was Joey's girlfriend and dumped Joey to go with Johnny. And Linda Ramone is what she calls herself now, and she has Johnny's ashes on her mantelpiece. There's that famous statue at Hollywood Forever Cemetery with Johnny and his guitar, which I think he's the world record, they say, the world record fastest guitarist. But he's actually not there. She's on the mantle of Linda Ramone's house until he dies. So he's not even there, which is interesting because people go to pay their respects to the Ramones, but he's not there. Dee Dee is. But Johnny was, they say that if he was so unpleasant to be around. They said if you just said the sky was blue, he'd argue with you and say, no, it's green. Just anything to sort of get a reaction, provoke a reaction. I remember when he was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and he said, God bless President Bush, and that pushed a lot of buttons. So Johnny Ramone was a button pusher and not a warm and fuzzy person, which is interesting because he's friends with all those people like Lisa Marie Presley and Nicolas Cage. but died of cancer. Loved the Ramones. Saw them about, I don't know, 7 or 8 times in concert. And but Johnny was sort of the diehard. He was the worker bee in the Ramones, and the Ramones are sorely missed. Cancer. Nancy Culp, the confirmed bachelorette, sipped from the furry cup. So Nancy, Beverly Hillbillies. She was in, oh God, what was that show with Wally Cox? Mr. Peepers, I think. But she was the Miss Jane Hathaway. That's how everyone knows her and loves her from that. And I do remember, I did talk to her on the phone one time when she was doing an interview on WLUP in Chicago, and they were doing phone-in questions, and I was able to talk to her about Buddy Ebsen, because she and Buddy Ebsen had a feud because I think she was running for Congress, and she was quite liberal in her views, and Buddy Ebsen wasn't. And he insinuated, or he accused her of insinuating that the rest of the cast of the Beverly Hillbillies were behind her when she was running for this position. I don't know what her ad said, but something about the Hillbillies and me, and Buddy Ebsen objected to that. So he did not an anti Nancy Culp ad, but for the opponent, just saying she's a bit too left for me. But anyway, Nancy Culp, gosh, I don't remember. I know she Palm Springs. That's what I remember the most. That's a funny one because I should know more about Nancy Culp. I know Lily Tomlin played the Miss Jane Hathaway part in the Beverly Hillbillies movie, but she was, just one of those character actors that was not the prettiest person on the playground, and they amped it up. Of course, she loved it too. I mean, that made her career, but she was. I'm stretching this one out because I don't remember much about Nancy Culp, except that a thing about with Buddy Ebsen. That's what stands out the most. And I was able to talk to her on the radio about her and Buddy Ebsen, but she just reiterated what I just told you about that election. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, live on the Sunset Strip. Richard Pryor, stand-up comedian, genius, live on the Sunset Strip. He did a movie with called Some Kind of Hero, which I loved, that movie. I think his mother, she had a stroke or something. The only word she could say was shit. She used to go, shit. For all of her emotions. That's what I remember the most about that. But he was, and of course, the incident with the smoking cocaine or smoking crack and running down the street on fire. Supposedly bisexual. I believe they say Richard Pryor had a thing with Marlon Brando, if I'm not mistaken. Did he have multiple sclerosis or muscular dystrophy? I think that's what was going on with him. Towards the end, he had that muscle degenerative condition, and it might have been muscular dystrophy, I think. A very, very sad, very long, painful, agonizing end to his life. And I think something about his daughter. But I mean, he was just a funny guy, a really, revered in the stand-up comedy world. I loved his stand-up. Pretty abrasive, but that was the time. I'm trying to think, there was got to be something else, but the Marlon Brando thing is what stands out the most. Adult movie theater, Deep Throat comes to mind too. And I think he's been cremated. I think his family has his ashes. It's another lackluster. Come on, Richard. No, I'm coming up blank on any more information about Richard Pryor. This is terrible. I should know more. I thought I was better versed at finding death, but it's clinking along. Trent Lehman, the Butch from Nanny and the Professor. He was the stripy shirt. He was such an iconic little kid actor, and also the kid actor that sort of perpetuated the whole child actor gone wrong sort of syndrome. And I think Nanny and the Professor only lasted 3 seasons, and he didn't make the transition. Again, one of those child stars that just didn't make the transition, and he ended up doing drugs. I think this was in Sylmar or Reseda or Lida, somewhere a little bit in the valley, not too far from Los Angeles, that after a night of partying hanged himself on the school playground, actually on the fence of the school playground. That's what I remember the most, was that I mean, obviously it's a stunning end as a child actor. What a way to go. And sadly is not very well known in that regard. And of course the other ones have gone on. Kim Richards is now one of the Real Housewives, which is kind of funny. And Juliette Mills was Nanny from Nanny and the Professor. We liked her. In fact, it was Nanny was at Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski's wedding. And when I asked her about it, I said, what was it like to go to that wedding? And she said, I didn't go to that wedding. I said, yes, you did. She said, no, I didn't. I said, no, you were there. You and your father were there. She goes, no, we weren't. I said, no, I'll show you. And I sent her the video. I don't know if I never get a response from her from that. But yeah. Juliette Mills. And then Kim Richards' sisters, Kyle Richards, is the little girl from the Halloween movies. That I could tell you about. David Dormus is still around. I think he was a dentist for a while, but he does the autograph shows now. He played Hal, the older brother. And Richard Long, dead, Valley, cancer. Sylvia Plath. Wow. I'm going to be sitting here in silence for a while. Sylvia Plath, let's see. The Bell Jar is the what comes to mind. And what's her husband's name? Ted? Oh, God. Because women, Sylvia Plath, a writer, an author, a poet, and spectacularly ended her own life by sticking her head in an oven. And I remember that was like in Primrose Hill in London. And her husband, what is it? I forget what his name was. Ted, maybe? People hate his guts. I mean, women hate his guts. Like demonstrations about this guy. He is so, because I guess he treated people terribly, like Cliff Odets or something like that. But yeah, that's what I remember the most, is that her husband at the time, I guess, was abusive toward her, and that's how she ended her own life. That's what I recall about Sylvia Plath. And The Bell Jar, that's her biggest hit. 46, 49, Primrose Hill. That's where Pat Quinn from the Rocky Horror Picture Show lives. And beautiful area of London. And I'm trying to think more about Sylvia Plath. I can't remember what her husband's name was. Not a nice guy though. And Sylvia, the Bell Jar was my ex Graham Norton's favorite book. I'll say that. I remember that. He was asked once about that. But yeah. I'm just going to keep saying Sylvia Plath. It's so sad. Sylvia Plath. I've got 11 more seconds. I am just, sadly, author. That was a stumper. Peter Lawford. That's a good one. Peter Lawford, actor. I thought he was really attractive too. He was on Bewitched. He was a member. He was like the honorary member of the Rat Pack, one that really didn't have much of a cachet to him as a performer. But they say that Sinatra let him in on the group because of his connections with JFK, because he was married to JFK's sister, and got him Sinatra access to JFK. Some people would say Peter Lawford pimped Marilyn out to JFK. I don't necessarily think that's true, but Peter Lawford was pretty slimy, I think. He was in the Bette Davis movie, The Dead Ringer, which I love. Um, Gosh, I know he'd been in some really good 70s movies, like probably made for TV movies, but I remember he was in some good like TV shows, like Night Gallery maybe or something. And hit the skids, alcoholic. I don't know if he was a drug addict. At the end, he married a woman named Patricia Seaton Lawford, and she wrote a book about him called The Peter Lawford Story and painted him to be the slimeball he was. I remember the best story about him wandering around the house. I couldn't get an erection, but he walked around with this electronic device attached to his penis called an AccuJack, and that's all she could say. She could hear him whirring and whirring from the other room. I remember that. Supposedly, had Marilyn called him on the night she died, which is such bullshit. But yeah, and he said to him, say goodnight to the president. And I remember Patricia Seaton Lawford in her book, when Peter Lawford died, said that Jackie Kennedy called her to offer her condolences at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And I'm like, yeah, like that really happened. Like Jackie Kennedy even gave a shit about Peter Lawford. And he's also in Westwood Cemetery. He was, and then his wife had him exhumed and scattered. Is that could have gone on about that one? Mabel King. Mabel King, what's happening? Okay, my Mabel King story. I love what's happening. I do. I love Raj and I love Dwayne and Rerun. Rerun was a bit exhausting, and Mabel King was Mama, and she was also in The Wiz. I liked her in that. I think she played Eveline the Witch or Evermean, one of the two. But my story about, so at the end, she was at the Motion Picture Country Home when they still took in actors towards the end of their lives who didn't have the means to support themselves. And it was a medical facility too. And I went to visit Stanley Kramer with my friend Steve, and Steve was talking to Stanley Kramer, and I went outside and Mabel King was out in the lobby. And Mabel King had this condition, I don't know what it was called, but she had this eye condition where they were really like wide and real. I don't know what it was, but they were like really kind of, intense. Like, I know she had that thing Susan Sarandon has. And she looked at me and I looked at her and I go, "Hi, how are you?" And she didn't say anything. She looked at me she had these long fingernails. She went like this. So I went over to her and she wanted to have a cigarette. So we went outside, and I was smoking still at that time. And we went outside and had a cigarette. And then I brought her back in and I got the eye again. I got the eye and the finger again. And then I went back outside. Oh, the reason, she made a fortune on a lawsuit because when they were moving her at the Motion Picture Country Home, they dropped her. I think the people who picked her up at home or something dropped her, and her family sued. And the settlement, I think, was her putting her up in the Motion Picture Country Home. I believe that's what it was. But anyway, she and I would go outside and smoke, and she didn't want to go back in, and it was really sad. It was really quite moving, actually, because she wanted me to come back. And the only way I could get her back into her room was to promise her I could come back, and I couldn't come back, and I knew that, but I just knew that was going to happen. Gail Russell. Who doesn't remember Gail Russell? The legendary Gail Russell. Wasn't she in John Wayne movies? She was in John Wayne movies. I remember that. And how did she die? Did I do a story on her? I must have. I must have done a story on her. But the thing that comes to mind is that she was drunk, and she drove into a restaurant on Beverly Boulevard, which is incidentally the same restaurant that Bardo, the guy that killed Rebecca Schaefer, went to get cookies and, no, what did he get? I forget what he had in between visits to Rebecca Schaefer when he murdered her the second time. But remember, she drove into Jan's restaurant, and I don't think it was called Jan's back then, and then, I don't know if she went away. They found her later, and they interviewed her. And they asked her how many drinks she had. And she said, I don't know, 3, 4. Oh, whose business is it anyway? Which I think is kind of funny. There's sort of like a badge of honor in that kind of attitude. But John Wayne, I remember she was in John Wayne movies. But yeah, not a huge star. There's probably some queen is losing his mind right now by me saying these things about her, the goddess. But yeah, John Wayne didn't die with 10 pounds of poo in his intestines, which is another good story. Gail Russell, that's a good one. Yeah, those good old Gail Russell movies. It's terrible, aren't I? I have a bad attitude. But and she was oh gosh. I should know more about Gail Russell, but unfortunately I don't. And John Wayne died of cancer, we know that. And I don't know if he died on his boat, but I know his boat's still around in Newport Beach. And he's finally buried in thank God. Dusty. We love Dusty. Dusty Springfield, another of the confirmed bachelorettes in today's festival of names. Dusty Springfield. I don't know if she was British actually. Was she British? Was she Welsh? I don't remember now, but I remember that she and her sibling, brother, at least a brother, were in a singing group before Dusty made it on her own. I think that her music is spectacular. I think Close My Eyes and Count to 10, I think, is one of the best songs ever written. I think that's such a beautiful song. And Tracy Ullman did a good cover of that as well, did a good cover. And I remember, her last hit was with the Pet Shop Boys. What Have I Done to Deserve This? Which is a great way to go out. What a great song to go out on. Her video made her look like Shirley from EastEnders. Bad wig. I don't know if she was, I don't know if she had cancer at that point. I don't know. But she did die of cancer. And I remember the funeral, because I was living over there at the time. And she had one of those beautiful traditional, British funerals. I want to say East End, but the one with the horse carriage, and they had the flowers that spell out their names inside the glass carriage, and it had the words Dusty on it, and I love that. But she was a great singer and a confirmed bachelorette, and Close My Eyes and Count to 10, and I Only Want to Be With You, which Annie Lennox detested singing when they were in a group called The Tourists. And I asked Annie Lennox about that, because they covered I Only Want to Be With You, and that's how I got turned on to them. And she said when I recorded that song, they made me record it, and I wanted to cry because they forced us to do it, because they wanted them to do a beast side. The end. That was interesting. No, it's like I kind of want to study, but I can't, because that's the whole thing. It's supposed to be on a mark just to see what I can come up with. So that was kind of a fun experiment, but I do feel like I need to cram for the next one. So thank you guys for tuning in for this. I hope that I wasn't too disappointing, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Troy, for putting that together. You heard me. Yeah.
You heard me.